Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga, Tennessee are joining the United Auto Workers Union. The National Labor Relations Board says 73% of the workers voted yes to joining the union on Friday.
The UAW says it wants to represent workers at 9 other American plants owned by foreign automakers. The union says an election at the Mercedes plant in Vance, Alabama, just outside of Tuscaloosa, is set to take place next month.
Joining us live this evening to discuss is business professor Merrick Masters from Wayne State University. Thanks for joining us tonight, Merrick.
Pleasure to be here. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So we've been discussing the potential for this to happen for months now, and here it is. It's a huge win for the UAW. Can you start just by putting into perspective how big a deal this is, not only for the UAW, but for organized labor in general?
For the UAW, it is a very big deal. It would have been a major setback if it had lost this campaign. It suggests to me that the UAW is very good at translating its signatures on authorization cards into votes, and that bodes well for what might happen at the next plant that they are having an election at, which is in Vance, Alabama, with Mercedes. After that, it's going to be more difficult, I think, for them to continue this momentum. But nonetheless, success breeds success, and I think that they will reinvigorate their efforts to organize all of the transplants and the domestic-based EVs in the United States. What it means for the broader labor movement, it's harder to tell, but the uphill climb that labor faces in general is still very steep. Membership continues to decline as an overall percent of the workforce, and the unions really have to get together and find a better way of getting their message across to workers in various industries, including manufacturing.
Seeing how quickly the entity that is the union continues to grow, what is this saying about the union itself and the work that it does for those employees?
Well, I think it continues to gain momentum. The question of whether it can grow a lot is still open. I think that you have to realize that this will add about 5,000 perhaps members to the UAW, which will put it at about 375,000, which is still less than it was the year before, and much less than the 1.5 million it had at its peak in the late 1970s. So there's a long way to go. The workforce has grown a lot since the 1970s, and unions across the board, as I indicated, have a lot to make up, and it will take really orders of magnitude in improvement in their organizing efforts to close the gap.
Merrick, how might this impact the big three? I mean, if more plants, more other automakers have to pay these higher labor costs, does that help the big three competitively?
I think it puts the big three in as difficult a situation as it possibly could be, because they've already given huge concessions. If they're able to organize the non-union facilities, that'll put pressure, more pressure on the big three to keep wages up. And I think what will happen across the board among all the companies is that they're going to start thinking seriously about their footprint in the United States and how much they can afford higher labor costs. I would add parenthetically that these non-union companies have not lessened their interest in remaining non-union, and I would expect that this victory at Chattanooga will only encourage them to step up their opposition to the UAW.
We've seen a lot of protests and walkouts across industries, restaurant workers, casino. Just last week, we saw doctors walk off the job. Do you think any of that has to do with the fact that we're seeing so much success with the UAW?
Well, as I indicated before, success breeds success, and I think people will look at this and get invigoration and want to take more risks in the process. But it's a big difference between translating those kinds of protests to actual collective bargaining agreements. There's two steps that have to be reached. One is you have to win a certification election, and then you have to negotiate a contract. As the workers at Starbucks have found out, you can win a certification election, but that doesn't mean you're any closer to getting a contract. The UAW, however, is in a position to negotiate a contract, and a lot of eyes will be upon the workers at Chattanooga to see when they actually get a contract out of this victory.
So you mentioned the potential for automakers to reconsider their footprint here in the U.S. Down the line, what do you think that could potentially mean for your average consumer, your average American car buyer?
Well, that you'll be looking at more foreign imports, perhaps with a cost advantage. If the Chinese are able to infiltrate our market, then you'll see, I think, them play a more prominent role, perhaps a very significant role, just as the international competitors from Japan did in the 1980s.
Based on what you've seen so far, what do you see for the UAW in the long run, in the future, as it continues to grow, potentially collect even more members?
Well, I think that a lot depends on the nature of the international competition in the U.S. economy and what we can do to rebuild American manufacturing. I, it's not going to be easy to win the rest of these certification campaigns that they have underway. They may have gotten the low-hanging fruit at this particular point in time, but each battle heretofore or hereafter is going to be that much more difficult than the ones they've just consummated. And unions, they may have a periodic victory here and there, but as I said, they've got to organize on orders of magnitude far greater than they've succeeded in, or their membership as a percentage of the overall workforce is going to continue to decline. And that's really what matters, is what your percentage of the workforce that is unionized, particularly in the industry.
All right, well, certainly a notable moment for these Volkswagen workers to be joining the union. Merrick, thanks so much for joining us today and helping to put it all in perspective for us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
You too.